The Galactic Defense Academy floated in the void between star systems, a massive structure of gleaming metal and energy shields that had trained the finest military minds for over 3,000 years. Inside its crystalline halls, representatives from 47 different species learned the art of interstellar warfare, strategy, and survival. The Academy's reputation was flawless. Its training simulations were considered the most advanced in known space, designed by the Krell Collective, a species whose computational abilities were legendary across 6 galaxies. Instructor Vexnara stood in the observation dome, her 4 eyes scanning the data streams that flowed across the transparent walls. She was a Threll, tall and angular, with skin that shimmered like polished obsidian. In her 2 centuries of teaching, she had never seen a simulation crash. The very idea was absurd. The Krell systems were built with redundancies upon redundancies, capable of modeling entire solar systems down to the quantum level. Yet here she was, staring at error messages that shouldn't exist. The cause of her frustration sat in the briefing room below, looking remarkably unconcerned for someone who had just done the impossible. Trainee Marcus Webb was human, one of the newest species to join the Galactic Council. Humans had only achieved faster-than-light travel 40 years ago, stumbling into the greater galactic community like children wandering into a university lecture. They were considered primitive, reckless, and dangerously unpredictable. Most instructors viewed human trainees as a temporary embarrassment, a political necessity, until their species either evolved or destroyed themselves. Marcus was lean and average in height by human standards, with dark hair that never seemed to stay in regulation style and eyes that held a constant gleam of mischief. He wore the standard Academy uniform, though somehow he managed to make it look rumpled within minutes of putting it on. His file indicated he had scored poorly on most theoretical examinations, but showed unusual aptitude in practical exercises. Vexnara had noted this with concern. Practical aptitude without theoretical foundation usually meant luck, and luck ran out. The simulation that had crashed was supposed to be simple. A routine border patrol scenario, the kind given to first-cycle trainees to teach them basic threat assessment and resource management. Trainees were placed in command of a small frigate, given a patrol route through an asteroid field, and tasked with identifying and responding to minor incursions. The simulation had been run successfully 17,000 times over the past century. Every species, from the methodical Krell to the aggressive Vorten warriors, had completed it within acceptable parameters. Marcus had broken it in 14 minutes. Vex single quotes. Nara pulled up the replay, watching it for the 5th time. The simulation began normally. Marcus received his mission briefing, acknowledged his orders, and took command of the frigate Steadfast. His crew consisted of 20 simulated officers, each programmed with realistic personalities and skill sets. The asteroid field appeared on sensors, a dense cluster of rocks ranging from pebble-sized debris to planetoids several kilometers across. Standard protocol dictated a careful navigation path, using sensors to map safe corridors while maintaining constant communication with command. The simulation typically took 2 hours to complete. Most trainees spent the time demonstrating their ability to follow orders, manage crew rotations, and file proper reports. It was, by design, somewhat boring. The Academy believed that learning to handle routine operations was essential before advancing to combat. Scenarios. Marcus had other ideas. 3 minutes into the simulation, he ordered his crew to reverse course and fly directly into the densest part of the asteroid field. His simulated first officer protested, citing safety regulations and the mission parameters. Marcus overrode him, claiming he had detected an anomaly that required immediate investigation. This was his first rule violation. Trainees were not authorized to deviate from mission parameters without explicit permission from command. The simulated command center responded as programmed, ordering Marcus to return to his designated route. He acknowledged the message, agreed to comply, and then immediately did the opposite. He increased speed, diving deeper into the asteroid field, while activating what the humans called radio silence, cutting off all communication with the command center. This was his second and third rule violations, serious enough that, in a real scenario, he would have faced court-martial. Vexnara had been ready to terminate the simulation at this point, marking it as a failure. But something made her hesitate. The error logs were already beginning to show unusual activity. The simulation's artificial intelligence, designed to respond to millions of potential scenarios, seemed confused by Marcus's actions. It was trying to predict his next move and failing. Marcus then did something no trainee had ever attempted. He ordered his crew to begin mining the asteroids. Not for resources, as might make tactical sense, but to deliberately create debris. He had them use the frigate's point defense lasers to fragment smaller asteroids, creating a cloud of high-velocity shrapnel. The simulation's physics engine went into overdrive, calculating trajectories for thousands of new objects. His simulated crew was in near revolt. The first officer demanded to know his intentions. The chief engineer reported that using weapon systems in this manner was against regulations and would damage the equipment. The communications officer was receiving increasingly urgent messages from command, now threatening to send a recovery team to arrest Marcus and relieve him of duty. Marcus ignored all of them. He was focused entirely on his sensor display, watching the patterns of debris with intense concentration. Then he did something that made Vexnara's crest flatten in disbelief. He shut down the frigate's engines and shields, letting the ship drift freely among the debris field. This was suicidal. Even in simulation, the action went against every survival instinct of every spacefaring species. The simulation struggled to process this. Its parameters didn't account for deliberate self-endangerment without purpose. It flagged the action as an error, tried to correct for it, and found itself in a logic loop. Meanwhile, Marcus sat calmly in his captain's chair, still watching his sensors. Then the proximity alarm started screaming. Something massive was moving through the asteroid field, something that hadn't been in the original mission briefing. The simulation had generated it in response to Marcus's unusual behavior, trying to create a consequence for his recklessness. It was a Vorten Raider, a heavy cruiser that should have been impossible for a small frigate to survive against. Marcus smiled. Vexnara saw it on the replay, that infuriating human expression of satisfaction. He had been waiting for this. Somehow, impossibly, he had predicted that the simulation would generate a threat in response to his actions. And he had prepared for it. What happened next would be discussed in Academy halls for years to come, assuming anyone could figure out exactly what Marcus had done. The debris cloud he had created, the precise shutdown of his systems, the exact position of his ship, all of it had been calculated. When the Vorten Raider appeared and began scanning for targets, it found nothing. The frigate Steadfast was hiding in plain sight, its energy signature masked by the chaos of the debris field. Its hull temperature matching the surrounding asteroid's. The Raider moved closer, searching. Marcus waited until it was at point-blank range, surrounded by the debris cloud. Then he fired every weapon the frigate had directly into the largest asteroids near the Raider. The resulting cascade of impacts and secondary explosions created a chain reaction that the simulation's physics engine had to calculate in real time. Thousands of variables, millions of trajectories, all happening simultaneously. The system began to lag. Vexnara watched the timestamp slow down as processing power was diverted to handle the unprecedented calculations. Marcus, apparently aware of what he was doing, ordered his crew to detonate the frigate's emergency fuel reserves. This added thermal energy to the equation, creating expanding gas clouds that interacted. with the debris in ways the simulation had never been designed to model. The final straw came when Marcus activated the frigate's faster-than-light drive while still inside the debris field and within spitting distance of an enemy vessel. This violated several laws of physics as understood by galactic civilization. FTL drives required clear space, stable gravitational fields, and precise calculations. Using one in these conditions should have been impossible. The simulation tried to calculate the outcome. It factored in spatial distortion, debris interaction, enemy ship proximity, and the unstable energy signatures from the earlier explosions. The processing load exceeded designed parameters. Secondary systems activated to handle the overflow. Those systems encountered the same impossible scenario and also exceeded their limits at 14 minutes and 37 seconds into what should have been a 2-hour training exercise. The most advanced combat simulation in galactic history experienced a critical failure and crashed completely, taking 3 backup systems with it. The silence in the Academy's main control center was absolute. Technicians from 6 different species stood frozen at their stations, staring at screens that displayed nothing but error codes. The ambient hum of the simulation core, a sound so constant that most had stopped noticing it years ago, had ceased. In the 3,000-year history of the Galactic Defense Academy, the core had never gone completely silent. Chief Technician Zorthmal was the first to move. The Krell engineer's crystalline body pulsed with rapid color changes, a sign of extreme agitation in his species. His multiple limbs flew across holographic interfaces, running diagnostic after diagnostic. Each result made his colors shift more dramatically. The simulation hadn't just crashed. It had encountered a scenario so far outside its operational parameters that it had initiated a complete core shutdown to prevent permanent damage to its processing matrix. Marcus remained in the briefing room, now surrounded by a rapidly growing crowd of Academy staff. He had been asked not to leave, though no one had explicitly ordered him to stay. The distinction seemed important to someone, though Marcus wasn't sure who. He sat at the table, hands folded, watching the chaos unfold through the room's transparent walls with an expression that others found difficult to read. Instructor Vexnara entered the room with the deliberate movements of someone trying very hard to maintain composure. Her skin had shifted from its usual polished black to a dull gray, another sign of stress in Thrall physiology. She carried a data tablet that she set down on the table with slightly more force than necessary. "Explain," she said. The single word carried the weight of multiple unspoken questions and at least one threat. Marcus leaned back in his chair, a gesture that Vexnara had learned meant humans were either relaxed or pretending to be. Given the circumstances, she suspected the latter. "The simulation was predictable," he said simply. "I tested its boundaries." "You destroyed 3,000 years of operational history," Vexnara replied, her voice tight. "You violated 17 regulations in the first 5 minutes alone. You ignored direct orders from your chain of command. You endangered your simulated crew. You used faster-than-light technology in a manner that should have vaporized your ship and everything within a light second of your position." "Should have," Marcus agreed. "But the simulation couldn't decide what would actually happen, so it quit." Vexnara's crest flattened completely against her skull. "This is not amusing, Trainee Webb. Do you understand the severity of what you've done? The simulation core will require days, possibly weeks to repair. Hundreds of trainees from dozens of worlds have had their education interrupted. The Krell Collective has already sent 3 emergency inquiry messages, demanding to know how their supposedly unbreakable system was compromised." "I didn't compromise anything," Marcus said, and there was an edge to his voice now. "I used it exactly as designed. The problem is that it was designed to handle tactics and strategies from species that all think the same way. You've all been flying in space for thousands of years. You've developed rules and protocols and standard procedures, and they work great against each other because you're all operating from the same baseline assumptions. He stood up, moving to the transparent wall that overlooked the simulation chamber below. Technicians swarmed around the massive core, their movements urgent and precise. Humans don't have those assumptions. We've been in space for 40 years. We don't know what's impossible yet. And that means we're willing to try things that your simulation never considered might happen. Ignorance is not a tactical advantage, Vexnara said coldly. Isn't it? Marcus turned to face her. Your simulation generated that Vorten radar because I deviated from expected behavior. It was supposed to be a punishment, a consequence for breaking the rules. But it appeared in exactly the way I predicted it would, because the simulation follows patterns. Everything about galactic military doctrine follows patterns. You teach those patterns here, reward students who learn them best, and send them out to fight wars using the same strategies everyone else uses. Vexnara opened her mouth to respond, and closed it again. She had spent 2 centuries teaching military theory. She had commanded ships in actual combat, fought in the Vorten incursions and the Krell border wars. She was a decorated officer and respected instructor. And this human, this child from a species barely out of their own solar system, was suggesting that everything she knew was predictable. The door to the briefing room slid open. Academy Director Thulvas entered, his massive frame filling the doorway. The Vorten commander was nearly 3 meters tall, covered in thick armor plating that was part of his biology, with eyes that glowed a faint red in the room's lighting. Behind him came 3 other figures. A Krell observer whose crystalline form refracted the light into rainbow patterns. A slender whisper whose translucent body seemed to fade at the edges. And a human woman wearing the insignia of an Earth Fleet admiral. Marcus straightened slightly, recognizing the admiral. Jessica Torres was a legend among human spacers, one of the first captains to make contact with alien species and live to tell about it. She had fought in the First Contact War, the brief but brutal conflict that had erupted from a series of misunderstandings between human and Vorten ships. Her presence here meant this situation had escalated far beyond a simple training accident. Trainee Webb, Director Thulvas' S voice rumbled like distant thunder. You have created quite a problem. Sir, Marcus began, but the director raised one massive hand. I did not say you did anything wrong. I said you created a problem. There is a difference. Thulvas moved to the table, and despite his size, settled into a chair with surprising grace. The Krell Collective wants you expelled from the Academy and banned from using their technology. They consider what you did to be either sabotage or proof that human neural patterns are incompatible with advanced systems. The Krell observers. Colors pulsed in what Marcus had. Learned was their equivalent of a nod. However, Thulvas continued. Admiral Torres has presented some interesting information. Your military record, Trainee Webb, is unusual. I don't have a military record, sir, Marcus said. I enlisted 6 months ago. Precisely. Admiral Torres spoke for the first time, her voice carrying the rough edges of someone who had spent too many years breathing recycled ship air. Before that, you are what we call a chaos gamer. Someone who specialized in breaking video games, finding exploits, pushing systems past their intended limits. Marcus felt heat rise in his face. His gaming hobby wasn't something he'd mentioned in his academy application. It hadn't seemed relevant to military service. On Earth, Torres continued, we have millions of people who spend their free time trying to break simulations. They compete to find glitches, exploit physics engines, and discover unintended behaviors in complex systems. It's entertainment for us. When I learned what you did to the Academy's simulation, I reviewed your gaming profiles. You hold records in 17 different games, for what's called speedrunning, completing scenarios in impossibly short times by using techniques the developers never intended. The Whisper representative spoke, her voice like wind through crystals. This is considered desirable in human culture? It's considered fun, Marcus said. And yeah, sometimes the best players get hired by game companies to help find problems before release. You treated our simulation like a game, Vexnara said. And there was something dangerous in her tone. No, Marcus replied. I treated it like a system with rules, and I tested what happened when I pushed against those rules. That's what simulations are for, aren't they? To find weaknesses before they show up in real combat? Tholvis leaned forward, his red eyes fixed on Marcus. Tell me, Trainee Webb, in that simulation, you predicted the appearance of the Vorten Raider. How? Marcus hesitated, organizing his thoughts. The simulation is designed to respond to trainee actions, right? To create realistic consequences. But it's also designed to be educational, which means it can't just randomly kill everyone who makes a mistake. So it has to follow certain patterns. When I broke protocol that severely, the system had to generate a threat significant enough to justify punishing my actions, but also one that could theoretically be overcome if I had the right skills. The Raider appeared exactly where optimal threat placement would dictate, the Krell observer admitted, his colors shifting to a pattern Marcus didn't recognize. The simulation chose the most educationally valuable position for an enemy encounter, which made it predictable, Marcus said. Everything else followed from that. The debris cloud, the power shutdown, the positioning. I was playing against the simulation's logic, not against an actual enemy. Director Tholvis sat back, his armored fingers tapping against the table in a rhythm that Marcus suspected meant something in Vorten body language. The question now is what to do with you. The Krell want you removed. Instructor Vexnara has filed a report recommending your immediate dismissal for multiple regulation violations. However, Admiral Torres has made a request. Torres stepped forward. I want him transferred to a special program. We've been developing new training protocols for human cadets, ones that account for our different approach to problem solving. But we need someone who thinks like this, who can help us identify the weaknesses in. The debate over Marcus Webb's fate continued for 3 days. During that time, the simulation core remained offline while Krell technicians worked to repair the damage and implement new safeguards. Marcus was confined to his quarters, which gave him plenty of time to think about what he'd done and whether the satisfaction of breaking an unbreakable system was worth the potential end of his military career. On the 3rd day, he received a summons to Conference Room 7, a space he'd never been to before. It was located in the Academy's administrative wing, far from the training areas where cadets normally spent their time. The walls were real stone, rather than the synthetic materials used in most of the station, imported from some planet Marcus didn't recognize. It felt important, formal, and slightly intimidating. The room was already occupied when he arrived. Director Tholvis sat at the head of a long table with Admiral Torres to his right and Instructor Vexnara to his left. But there were others present as well, faces Marcus recognized from Academy databases but had never expected to meet. Fleet Commander Seriskal of the Whisper Dominion, whose people were known for their intelligence gathering and unconventional warfare. General Krexner, a Vorten tactical genius, who had written half the textbooks used in advanced strategy courses. And most surprisingly, Master Architect Gendler of the Krell Collective, whose presence suggested this meeting carried implications far beyond one troublesome trainee. Marcus stood at attention, waiting to be acknowledged. The silence stretched uncomfortably as the assembled officers examined him with varying degrees of interest and suspicion. Finally, Tholvis spoke. Trainee Webb, we have reviewed your case extensively. The conclusion we have reached is both simple and complicated. He paused, and Marcus could have sworn He saw amusement in those glowing red eyes. "You are being promoted." Marcus blinked. "Sir?" "Effective immediately. You hold the rank of specialist and are assigned to a new joint task force being created by this council. You will report to Admiral Torres for your specific duties." Thulva slid a data chip across the table. "Your official orders and clearance codes." Vexnara's skin had gone completely gray. "Director, I must protest. This sets a dangerous precedent. Every regulation he violated exists for sound tactical reasons. We cannot reward such blatant disregard for military discipline." "We are not rewarding disregard for discipline," Master Architect Schindler said, his crystalline voice carrying harmonics that made the air shimmer. "We are acknowledging a capability that our current systems cannot accommodate. The human broke our simulation, not through sabotage or malice, but by approaching the scenario from a perspective our designers never considered possible. This is valuable data." "Data?" Vexnara's crest rose sharply. "He crashed a system that has operated flawlessly for 3 millennia. Flawlessly within known parameters," Schindler corrected. "The simulation performed exactly as designed when faced with conventional tactics from recognized species. It failed when confronted with unconventional approaches from a new perspective. This failure reveals a critical weakness in our defensive architecture." General Krexner leaned forward, his armor plates grinding softly. "Instructor Vexnara, how many simulated Vorten raiders have Academy trainees defeated in the border patrol scenario?" "None, sir," Vexnara admitted. "The scenario is not designed for combat victory. Trainees are expected to evade, report, and await reinforcements. And in actual combat situations, how effective has that doctrine proven?" Vexnara hesitated. "The survival rate for scout frigates encountering Vorten raiders is approximately 37%, sir." 37%, Krexner repeated. "Yet this human, in his first attempt, created a scenario where a frigate potentially destroyed or disabled a heavy raider, using nothing but creative application of available resources. The simulation crashed before we could see the outcome. But the trajectory analysis suggests his tactic might have worked." Fleet Commander Saris Call spoke for the first time, her translucent form seeming to flicker as she moved. "The Whisper Dominion has long advocated for more unconventional thinking in galactic military doctrine. We have watched species after species join the Council and immediately adopt the same tactical frameworks, the same strategic assumptions. It creates predictability, which creates vulnerability. The humans are not burdened by 3,000 years of established doctrine," she continued. "They have no legacy systems to maintain, no historical victories to justify current methods. They approach each problem as if it were entirely new, which sometimes makes them seem reckless or ignorant. But it also means they see possibilities that we have trained ourselves not to consider." Admiral Torres stood, moving to stand beside Marcus. "The Earth Fleet has been studying this phenomenon. We call it beginner's advantage. When you don't know the rules, you can't be limited by them. Every human ship captain, every tactical officer, they all come from a culture where breaking systems and finding exploits is considered normal, even entertaining. We don't just accept creative problem solving, we celebrate it." She placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "This young man didn't attack your simulation with malice. He approached it the same way he'd approach any complex system, by testing its limits, looking for edge cases, and exploiting whatever he found. On Earth, we have entire communities dedicated to this kind of thinking. We have millions of people who spend their free time breaking games, hacking systems, and finding creative solutions to problems. And you consider this a military asset?" Vexnara asked, her tone skeptical. "We consider it essential for survival," Torres replied. "Because here's what we've learned in our 40 years among the stars. Everyone in the galaxy is better than us at almost everything. Your ships are faster, your weapons more powerful, your shield stronger. You have technologies we don't understand and tactical experience spanning millennia. If we fight you on your terms, using your rules, we lose every single time. But if we change the rules, if we approach problems from angles you don't expect, we have a chance. That's what Marcus did. He didn't beat the simulation through superior firepower or advanced technology. He beat it by refusing to play the game the way it expected to be played. Master Architect Jinler's colors pulsed in a pattern that Marcus had learned indicated deep thought. The human raises an important point about our simulation. It was designed to teach conventional tactics against conventional threats. But warfare is not always conventional. The Krell Collective believes that a robust defensive system must be able to handle unconventional approaches, or it is not truly robust. Which brings us to the task force, Director Thulvis said. The Council has authorized the creation of a special unit tasked with finding and exploiting weaknesses in galactic military infrastructure. They will attack our own systems, test our defenses, and identify vulnerabilities before our actual enemies can exploit them. They will operate outside normal military hierarchy and will have authorization to break any non-critical regulation in pursuit of their mission. Marcus felt his heart rate increase. This was either the best opportunity of his life or an elaborate setup to make him someone else's problem. The unit will be small, Torres said. Carefully selected individuals from various species who demonstrate the ability to think unconventionally. You'll be one of the first members, Marcus. Your job will be to break things. Simulations, tactical scenarios, defensive protocols, anything we put in front of you. And then you'll help us figure out how to fix them. The Krell Collective will provide resources and technical support, Chandler added. We are particularly interested in understanding how human neural patterns interact with our computational systems. Your species processes information differently than any we have previously encountered. This difference creates both challenges and opportunities. General Krexnerus' expression was difficult to read behind his armored features, but his tone carried something that might have been respect. The Vorten Empire has fought wars for longer than some species have existed. We have seen countless tactics, faced numerous enemies, and developed counters for every conventional strategy. But unconventional thinking? That is something we value highly. It is why I support this initiative, despite my people's natural suspicion of the unpredictable. There will be rules, Vexnara said firmly. She had not changed her position, but Marcus detected a slight shift in her tone. Even unconventional operators must understand proper military discipline. You cannot simply do whatever you wish without consequence. Agreed, Torres said. Marcus, you'll undergo additional training in military protocol, chain of command, and proper documentation procedures. You'll learn when it's appropriate to break rules and when it's absolutely not. The difference between creative problem-solving and dangerous. Negligence is knowing which situations call for which approach. Marcus found his voice. What if I mess up? What if I break something that can't be fixed? Then you will face consequences appropriate to the damage, Thulvis said bluntly. This is not permission to be reckless. This is recognition that some situations require approaches that appear reckless from a conventional perspective. Learning to distinguish between the two will be part of your training. Sarah's skull flickered slightly, her form becoming more solid. The whisper Dominion H. I'll do my best, Marcus said finally. But I can't promise I won't break more things. We would be disappointed if you promised otherwise, Thulvis rumbled. Your assignment begins immediately. Admiral Taurus will brief you on your first mission. Dismissed. Marcus saluted, trying to remember the proper protocol for addressing a mixed-species council. He must have done something right, because no one corrected him. He followed Torres out of the conference room, his mind spinning with the implications of everything he'd just heard. They walked in silence through the administrative corridors until they reached a secure lift that Torres activated with her command codes. As the lift descended toward the lower levels of the academy, she finally spoke. "You know why I pushed for this, right? Why I fought to keep you in the program instead of letting them ship you back to Earth. Because you need people who think differently?" Marcus suggested. "Because we're terrified," Torres said bluntly. Humanity is the newest species in a galaxy full of civilizations that have been spacefaring for thousands of years. We have technology we barely understand, treaties we're still learning to navigate, and enemies we only recently discovered existed. Every other species looks at us and sees primitive newcomers who got lucky with our FTL discovery. The lift stopped, and the doors opened onto a level Marcus had never seen before. It looked more like a research facility than a military installation, with laboratories and computer systems lining the corridors. "But here's what scares me," Torres continued as they walked. "Everyone in the galaxy fights the same way. Oh, there are variations in tactics and technology, but the fundamental approaches are all based on the same assumptions. The Krell use computational superiority, the Vorten rely on overwhelming force, the Whisper employ misdirection and intelligence gathering. But they all operate from a shared framework of what warfare should look like." She stopped in front of a sealed door, placing her hand on the security scanner. "Humans don't have that framework. We've been fighting each other for our entire history, using every dirty trick, unconventional tactic, and innovative strategy we could imagine. We don't have rules about honorable combat or proper military engagement. We have a saying, 'All's fair in love and war.' It means we'll do whatever it takes to win." The door opened, revealing a large operations center. Multiple holographic displays showed star maps, tactical scenarios, and what looked like security assessments of various military installations. A small team of people, both human and alien, worked at different stations. "Welcome to Task Force Chimera," Torres said. "Our official mission is to conduct security assessments of Council military assets. Our actual mission is to figure out how to keep humanity alive if the political situation goes bad." Marcus stared at her. "You think there's going to be a war?" "I think there are factions in the Council who see Earth as a threat. A species that went from chemical rockets to faster-than-light travel in less than a century. A species that looks at established rules and immediately starts looking for ways around them. A species that treats military simulations like video games and crashes systems that were supposed to be unbreakable." She met his eyes. "We scare them, Marcus. And scared people do dangerous things." One of the team members approached, a young human woman with lieutenant insignia on her uniform. "Admiral, we've finished the analysis on the simulation crash. You're going to want to see this." They moved to a central display where the simulation's final moments were frozen in a three-dimensional representation. Marcus recognized his frigate, the debris cloud, the Vorten raider, all suspended in the instant before the system crashed. "We managed to reconstruct what would have happened if the simulation had been able to continue," the lieutenant explained. "The results are remarkable. The debris cloud would have impacted the raider's shields at velocities sufficient to cause cascading failures. The thermal bloom from the fuel detonation would have disrupted their sensor arrays. And the FTL activation, while technically impossible under normal circumstances, created a spatial distortion that the simulation interpreted as a localized gravitational anomaly. She manipulated the display, showing the probable outcome. The raider would have been disabled, possibly destroyed. The frigate would have suffered moderate damage, but remained operational. Casualties among the simulated crew would have been minimal, primarily from the unconventional maneuvers rather than enemy fire." "He won," Torres said softly. "Against an enemy that should have been impossible to defeat. Using a ship that was completely outmatched, you found a way to win." "I got lucky," Marcus protested. I was making educated guesses about how the simulation would respond. In a real combat situation, there are too many variables. But that's exactly the point, another voice said. Marcus turned to see a Krell technician approaching, his crystalline form refracting the display light into rainbow patterns. Real combat situations have too many variables for anyone to account for. The difference is that most species try to reduce variables, to create controlled conditions where their superior technology and experience provide advantages. You increased variables, created chaos, and used that chaos as a weapon. The Krell introduced himself as Resonance in Crystal, though he said Marcus could call him Race. I was one of the designers of the simulation you broke. I spent 40 cycles creating a system that I believed could handle any scenario. You proved me wrong in less than 15 of your minutes. I am here because I want to understand how. I just looked for patterns, Marcus said. The simulation had to follow certain rules to be educational. Once I figured out what those rules were, I could predict how it would respond. But you also broke rules, Reese pointed out. You violated protocols, ignored orders, and used technology in ways it was not designed to be used. How did you know which rules were safe to break? Marcus thought about that. I guess I asked myself which rules existed for good reasons and which existed just because nobody had thought to question them. The rule about not using FTL drives near large masses? That exists because the gravitational distortion can cause navigation errors or tear the ship apart. But the simulation was dealing with asteroids, not planets. The mass was there, but it was distributed differently. So I figured the rule might not apply the same way. You performed relativistic physics calculations in your head during a combat scenario? Vexnara's voice came from behind them. She had entered the operations center quietly, her expression unreadable. Not really calculations, Marcus said. More like intuition based on pattern recognition. I play a lot of space games that model physics pretty accurately. You develop a feel for what's possible at the edges of the rules. Games, Vexnara repeated, and Marcus couldn't tell if she was disgusted or impressed. You based military tactics on recreational simulations designed for entertainment. The best training tools often feel like games, Torres interjected. They engage the mind, reward creative thinking, and allow for safe failure. Earth's military has been using gamification in training for decades. It works. Vexnara moved to the display, studying the frozen simulation. I have reviewed the incident extensively. I have consulted with colleagues from 7 different species. The consensus is that what you did should not have worked. The debris field density was insufficient. The thermal bloom would have dissipated too quickly, and the FTL activation should have simply failed rather than creating the effect you predicted. But it did work, Marcus said. Within the simulation's physics model, yes. The question is whether it would work in reality. She turned to face him directly. That is why I am here. Director Thulvis has assigned me as your primary instructor for Task Force Chimera. My job is to teach you the difference between simulation exploits and practical tactics, to help you understand which unconventional approaches might actually work in combat and which will simply get you killed. Marcus felt his stomach sink. Having Vexnara as his instructor seemed like a punishment disguised as an opportunity. But Torres was smiling slightly, which suggested there was more to this assignment than met the eye. Instructor Vexnara commanded scout frigates during the Vorten incursions, Torres said. She's one of the few officers in the Galactic fleet who survived multiple encounters with superior enemy forces through unconventional tactics. She's also one of the few senior instructors who openly advocated for accepting human cadets into the Academy program. That surprised Marcus. Vexnara had seemed nothing but hostile since the simulation incident. I did not advocate because I like humans, Vexnara said, apparently reading his expression. I advocated because the galaxy needs new perspectives. We have become stagnant, relying on established doctrine and proven methods. Innovation has slowed to a glacial pace because everyone who might think differently has been trained to think the same way. She gestured at the frozen simulation. What you did was reckless, undisciplined, and violated every principle of proper military conduct. It was also brilliant, and it revealed a weakness in our systems that could have been exploited by actual enemies. She moved closer to Marcus, her 4 eyes fixing him with an intense stare. My job is to take your chaotic, intuitive approach to problem-solving and give it structure. To teach you when to break rules and when to follow them. To help you understand TH